Hello everyone, and welcome to the Joint Snapping System version of 1.20.0. For Blender versions 3.3 to 4.5. In this video, I'm going to cover all the new features for the Joint Snapping System, starting with the Edit Prefab button. The Edit Prefab button will let you edit any prefab item list item. All you have to do is place it in the scene, select the item, and then click Edit Prefab. Edit Prefab will populate all the snapping points from the list item exactly as you saved it. You can make changes because freeze boundary box mode is active, and it's not going to automatically adjust itself while you're changing the geometry. You can change the geometry. You can edit the snapping points by going into Edit Snapping Points, toggling that on. And you can move these points around however you want. And then when you're done, you just click Update Prefab, and that'll update the list item. This workflow is a lot faster and more convenient than it was before. Now I'll just hit Cancel. Another new big feature we added was universal snapping points. Universal snapping points can be added to any object, even objects in the scene, or prefab objects that you place in the scene. So let me demonstrate. Let's make an object here. Let's give it some geometry. And I'll select the face, press Shift+J. Then I'll choose Batch Jointify from Selection. Batch Jointify from Selection will add a new empty that designates where the snapping point will go. It's got XYZ coordinates, and it automatically detects the surface normals point away off of the surface. You can change this by pressing Q. Q will change it to orthogonal orientation. Or you can just rotate it however you want, and that'll be a custom rotation. You can undo that. And you can see up here at the top right, it gives you the orientation. You can tell there's a custom. So I'm going to hit Q a few times, and that'll change the surface. You can add multiple at a time within the same operation. You can do batch jointify from selection, add multiple universal snapping points. You can move them around however you see fit, or you can delete them. I'm going to select these three that I created, press X to delete. And when you're done editing the snapping points, press Enter. So the snapping points are there, but they're invisible. All you have to do is press J. J is now the reposition key. You can now reposition any object from the scene that is a joint ready object, or a prefab object from the list. So again, J to reposition. It also highlights the snapping points for you to see. You can press Shift-D to duplicate, and you can press J on this duplicate item, snap it, and you can snap it like that. So these objects are working snapping objects, and they also accept objects to be snapped to them. When you're snapping an object to a universal snapping point, you'll notice that it inherits the the rotation. So we now support angled rotations of the snapping points. This works for any surface. When you're snapping to a snapping point, you can also hold the Control key and what's called force snapping mode. Force snapping mode allows you to drag the mouse around the screen to rotate in 90-degree increments. And you can add objects off of that object. And any object that you add will inherit that 45-degree angle. But let's say you want the pipe elbow to go directly downwards. How would you do that? Well, you could press R and rotate it, but the pivot point is at the center. So it's going to be offset. There's a better way, and that is through force snap mode. Hold Control, and then hold Shift to snap in 15-degree increments. And because it's at a 45-degree angle, you can snap it directly downwards in 15-degree increments. And you can add a pipe here, have something like that. Now there's other options in the Shift+J contextual menu. There's Magical Jointify, there's Edit Snapping Points, and there's Delete All Snapping Points. I'm going to go ahead and delete these pipes. And we're going to reposition this object so you can see the snapping points. And let's just delete all snapping points. You can see it still remains a joint ready object, but it has no snapping points now. But if we go Shift-J and do Magical Jointify, it's going to add a snapping point to every surface that was selected. In this case, the whole object. Magical Jointify has a few options here in the last used operation box. You can change the orientation from orthogonal to surface. You can change the sensitivity so that only a couple get added at a time. And yeah, you can edit these snapping points by clicking or by pressing Shift-J and pressing Edit Snapping Points. Notice how they all turn into the XYZ handles. And you can add or delete how you see fit. Let's just press Enter. But there's something with Magical Jointify that might not work for your workflow, and that's these snapping points. Notice on these sides here how they're not perfectly centered with the whole object. They use the geometry of that face to determine its center. So you may want actually a combination between the legacy grid and the new universal snapping points. So for example, if I create a prefab, and this is the legacy snapping, this is the legacy grid. The legacy grid lets you change the geometry however you want, and the snapping points will always remain in the exact center of that boundary box. So you may want a combination of two, where you have snapping points on all sides. But let's say you add geometry, and let's say you want a snapping point on this face. You can select that face, press Shift+J, do batch jointify from selection. Then press Enter, and now you have a snapping point at that face. You can save this to a prefab. And there's your new working prefab that accepts snapping points. So you can snap any object to it. Or, of course, you can snap it to itself and make it a perfect row. The whole workflow is very forgiving. There's a lot of steps where you can always go into edit snapping points mode. And you can see here the distinction between the two types of snapping points. The blocks are the legacy snapping points, and the XYZ empties represent universal snapping points that you added yourself. I'm just going to cancel that. Another feature we added was the Z-axis support for creating a prefab. So you can make it up here in the top right, where it says XYZ, you can make the create prefab a 2x2x4, for example. And when you create a prefab, you can see it's a 2x2x4. This would work really well for pillars. So you can get evenly distributed points on the surfaces, but you're not limited to that legacy grid. Like I said before, you can always edit the geometry and add joints to surfaces. And another use case of the magical jointify would be for pipes. Let's create a pipe real quick. So there's our pipe. Let's put it at 45-degree angles on the Y axis. And we can use magical jointify to put a point right here at the center of this hole. So let's press Shift+J, magical jointify, and let's change the sensitivity so it only puts points at the top and bottom. So now this pipe is ready to go. Press Shift+J to move this around. Sorry, J to reposition this. Shift-D to duplicate. And you can create something like that. And what's nice is the whole workflow is contained, so you can actually press from active mesh, and it's going to copy those snapping points you created in the world onto this prefab object. So now you can edit this however you wish. You can add more snapping points, delete snapping points, and then when you're done, you can save it to a list. Hit Save Prefab. You can delete that world item, and here's the object in the list. And you can place this as prefab. So that's really easy. This would work for elbows in pipes as well. If you have two sides to it, or multiple sides, like Y shapes, like Y-shaped pipes. But let's say you need to get really technical and you need to be very precise with where you put the joint snapping system, and you can't rely on a magical jointify solution. Well, you can also, let's say, let's rotate this 45 degrees. You can also select a ring, and you can use add universal joint from selection. And that'll do the same thing where it detects the center of that selection and puts a universal joint right in the center. So that's another way. If magical jointify isn't working for you, you can use this method. Press enter, and there it is. Same solution, different method. Now here's another situation. What if you want to add snapping points to each of these faces, for these bricks? Well, you can do that. Select each face, batch jointify from selection, press enter, and now you have snapping points on all those studs. So you can select a piece here, and have something like that. So really, this makes subdivision mode and alternative snapping mode obsolete. That's why we removed it in this update, because you don't need to subdivide uh, a snapping point grid anymore. You can just choose exactly where you want the snapping points to be. So thanks for watching the video. I hope you like it. That's all the features in this new update. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and give the add-on a try if you find it interesting. I really hope you enjoy it. What I really want is for a lot of new users to come in, start making lists, sharing lists. That would be the dream of mine. If we could get more people involved to make lists and share them, um, that would be awesome. So again, thanks so much for watching.